Yesterday, Sayadaw explained that among the Four Noble Truths, the first two are called Lokiya Satya, and they are difficult to be known, and thus they are profound. The later two are called Vipassana Satya. They are profound, and thus they are difficult to be known. The first two, Dukkha Satya, the truth of suffering, and Samudaya Satya, the truth of origin of suffering, these two are called Lokiya Satya or Vata Satya, mundane kind of noble truth. Dukkha Satya, the truth of suffering, should be discerned, it should be known clearly. And these Dukkha Satya, the truth of suffering, consists of Nama and Rupa phenomena that are arising at the sixth sense door. One should be mindful so that one will know that these Nama Rupa phenomena that are arising at the sixth sense door are suffering. If one does not know that these Dhamma are suffering, one will have craving, one will crave on them, and there will be clinging. By discerning Dukkha Satya, by discerning the truth of suffering, Tasna, craving, cannot arise. And by practicing Satipatthana meditation, one should remove the opposite mental states such as avijja and tanha, ignorance and craving. The opposite mental states such as avijja and tanha, ignorance and craving are concealing, hiding, so that these truths cannot be realized by the person. If one can remove these opposite mental states that are hiding and concealing the truth, then one will discern that the Nama Rupa phenomena that are arising at the sixth sense door are suffering. Knowing that they are suffering, one will not think of them as good, and thus Tasna, craving, has no chance to arise. Removing Tasna, removing craving, one is said to be dispelling Samudaya Satya, the origin of suffering. Knowing that these Nama Rupa phenomena are suffering, one will not have Tasna, craving, and thus craving Tasna has no chance to arise, and Tasna, craving, will be removed. Tasna, craving, being Samudaya Satya, the origin of suffering, and thus this Tasna, craving, must be removed. And Buddha taught that Samudaya Satya, the truth of origin of suffering, should be removed. By knowing Dukkha Satya, the truth of suffering, one can remove Samudaya Satya, one can remove Tasna, craving. These two kinds of truth, the truth of suffering, should be discerned, and Samudaya Satya, the truth of origin of suffering, should be removed. These two are difficult to be known, and thus they are profound. But if one can remove the opposite mental states that are hiding, concealing the truth, these two truths will be obvious to the person who can remove these opposite mental states. It is said that Gambiropi Dhammo Patipakha Vigamanena Supagato Bhaveya. It means that even though the truths are profound, but if one can remove the opposite mental states that are hiding and concealing these truths, by removing these opposite mental states, the truth will become obvious and known to the yogi. In order to remove these opposite mental states, one should practice systematically according to the correct method. Practicing according to the correct method, one can remove and dispel these opposite mental states. One should practice Sila Samadhi Panya, morality training, concentration training, and wisdom training so that one can overcome these opposite mental states. By practicing Sila, morality, one can overcome Vitekama Kilesa, transgressive defilements that can manifest in the mind and that can manifest in the body and speech. So by practicing Sila, one can remove Vitekama Kilesa that can manifest as transgression by body and speech. The Samadhi Khanda, the concentration group, which consists of Viriya, Sati and Samadhi, effort, mindfulness and concentration, can overcome Priyuttana Kilesa, obsessive form of defilement that can manifest in the mind. When one wants to kill others, want to steal other people's things, want to torture others, if such wrongful thought, wanting to kill, steal, torture, then Priyuttana Kilesa, obsessive form of defilement, will manifest in the mind. By practicing Samadhi training, by practicing concentration training, one can overcome such obsessive defilement that can manifest in the mind. When one had attained Vipassana Panya and Magga Panya, insight knowledge and path knowledge, one can suppress, overcome and uproot latent or dormant form of defilements. By practicing systematically on these three kinds of training, Sila, Samadhi and Panya, morality, concentration and wisdom, one can overcome gross, medium and refined form of defilements. Removing of these opposite mental states has to do with practicing systematically. It means that one should not be away from these practices. One should practice these three kinds of training. It is a must, it is a should to practice the three kinds of training systematically so as to overcome these opposite mental states. Failing to practice the three trainings, the opposite mental states will be hiding, concealing, blocking the truth, so that the person will be in darkness, not knowing the truth. Sammapatipatti means practicing correctly according to the correct method. When practicing sitting meditation, yogis are noting rising and falling of the abdomen as the primary object. When noting rising, one should be mindful from the very beginning of the rising throughout the end of rising. In order to note the whole rising from the very beginning till the end, one should aim the mind towards the object and put effort. Noting the rising of the abdomen with aim and effort, the noting mind will be face to face with the object, and thus the mind will be free from opposite mental states of nivarana, hindrances such as kama chanda, sensual desire, vyabhada, ill will, and so on. The mind is free from these hindrances, and it is called patipakha vigamana. The mind is free from these opposite mental states. In order that the noting mind should reach the object of meditation, one should exert ardent effort Exerting ardent effort, laziness cannot arise. When one's mind is slack and sluggish, laziness will creep in. One will not want to exert effort. One wants to withdraw from the practice. Not wanting to exert effort and then being lethargic. One wants to take easy in the practice. But exerting effort, such kind of laziness cannot arise, and thus there will be Paṭipakඛa Vigamana. One will be free from opposite mental states such as laziness when one exerts ardent effort. Practicing diligently with ardent effort, there will be sustained mindfulness. Mindfulness will stick onto the object, and thus there will be Satipatthana. The mindfulness will be closely established. Having sati, mindfulness, this mindfulness protects the mind so that the opposite mental states, kilesa defilements, cannot enter the mind. And thus the mind is guarded, protected away from these kilesa defilements when mindfulness is present. There will also be collectedness of mind. There will be concentration, samadhi. Having concentration, samadhi, one's mind will not be distracted. It will not be scattered. There will not be restlessness or remorse. The mind will be free from agitation by these defilements. And thus, there will be Paṭipakඛa Vigamana. Having concentration, the defilements such as distraction, restlessness and remorse has no chance to arise. Having viriya, sati and samadhi, having effort, mindfulness and concentration, there will be samadhi khanda, concentration group. And when this concentration group becomes strong, the noting mind will be direct with the object. The mind will fall calm and collected on the object, and thus the person will see the true nature. When noting rising and falling of the abdomen, when one's samadhi khanda, concentration group, is strong, one will know the true nature such as stiffness, tension, movement in rising and falling of the abdomen. And thus, dukkha satya, the truth of suffering, will be obvious to the person. It will be supakata. The truth of suffering will be outstandingly obvious to the yogi. And when noting rising of the abdomen, when one's noting is effective, when one's viriya, sati, samadhi are strong, one sees the rising layer by layer, segment by segment of the rising of the abdomen. So it is just like when you take a look at the row of termites from very close place. One can see the termite, one can see each and individual termite moving in a row. In the same way, when one observes carefully, even in one rising of the abdomen, one can see distinctly, layer by layer, segment by segment, of the movement, stiffness and tension and so on. So in this way, dukkha satya, the truth of suffering, will be discerned distinctly and clearly. Even though the truth are difficult to be known and profound, but as one practices systematically, the truth will be obvious to the yogi, and the yogi will know clearly. It is said that dukkha pariññeya, one has to discern the truth of suffering. And samudaya satya pahatabba, it means that one should remove and dispel samudaya satya, the truth of origin of suffering. Knowing correctly, there will not be not knowing, and thus there will not be tasna, craving. Knowing that these objects are dukkha satya, truth of suffering, one will not crave on these objects. If one takes things as good and pleasant, there will be craving, but if one knows correctly that these things are suffering, craving has no chance to arise, and thus craving is removed. When craving is removed, it is according to the saying, samudaya satya pahatabba. By removing craving, one is said to be removing samudaya satya, the truth of origin of suffering. When viriya in practicing, in each noting, viriya, sati and samadhi, effort, mindfulness and concentration are present. The noting mind will be direct with the object. One will come to see clearly, distinctly, and thus paññā, knowledge will also be developed. So in each noting, viriya, sati, samadhi, effort, mindfulness and concentration, and also paññā are involved. And in each noting, there are pañcāngika magga, the 5 factors of path, which are the forerunner of Ariya Magga, the forerunner of path knowledge. So when the yogis are practicing, they are observing precepts. The lay yogis are practicing 8 precepts, and the monks, they are observing Patimokkha. Even though there are no things to be refrained from, but because they have the volition that if things come up, one would refrain from it. In this way, there will be Tirana Sila. And also, when one talks, one will talk correctly. There will be right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And thus, there will be Sila, Samadhi, Paññā, morality, concentration, and wisdom training in each noting. So in each noting, the 3 trainings are involved, and also 8 factors of the path are also involved in each noting. By knowing distinctly the dukkha satya, truth of suffering, one is removing not knowing and knowing wrongly, and thus one also removes craving and clinging, and thus kilesa defilements have no chance to arise when one discerns dukkha satya. When these kilesa defilements has no chance to arise, by being mindful, there will be the Danga Nirodha, there will be momentary cessation. When noting the presently arising object, one is discerning dukkha satya, the truth of suffering, one is removing tanha, craving, and thus one is dispelling samudaya satya, the truth of origin of suffering. And at the moment of noting, kilesa defilements have no chance to arise, and thus there will be nirodha, the Danga Nirodha, momentary cessation. And by being mindful, one is not doing Vattakami Kusala, the kind of wholesomeness that will lead to further assistances And also, one is not developing akusala, unwholesomeness. In this way, by being mindful, one is said to be free from the kind of deed that leads to further assistance. Being free from deeds that lead to further assistance, vipaka, resultants, are also removed. In this way, when one is being mindful, one is said to be overcoming the three kind of vata, the three kind of rounds, kilesa vata, round of defilements, kamma vata, round of deeds, and vipaka vata, round of resultants. And there will be the Ganga Nirodha, momentary cessation. So in this way, by discerning the dukkha satya, one discerns the truth of suffering, one removes the tanha, the origin of suffering, and also one attains momentary cessation, nirodha satya, and also one develops the 8 factors of path. So in this way, by discerning the dukkha satya, one also removes the truth of origin of suffering, samudaya satya, and also one momentarily attains nirodha satya, there will be momentary cessation, and also one also develops the 8 factors of path, which is magga satya. So by practicing according to the method given, by practicing correctly, one will know the true nature, and thus one is also developing, one is also discerning the Four Noble Paths. By knowing distinctly dukkha satya, the truth of suffering, one also removes the truth of origin of suffering by removing tanha, craving momentarily, and also one removes the other kilesa defilements such as avijja, ignorance. There will be momentary cessation, the Ganga Nirodha, by discerning dukkha satya. And also there will be Upa-bhāga magga, preliminary path, which is the forerunner of Ariya Magga, path knowledge. So in this way, by discerning dukkha satya, the other 3 satya are also involved. So in this way, yogis should rejoice that they are practicing. By practicing, they can discern dukkha satya as well as the other 3 satya. The other 3 noble truths will be involved in their practice. So they should compare from their experience to the teaching of the Buddha. The 3 trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, and also the preliminary path, that are the forerunners of Ariya Magga, one should develop and cultivate them. One should develop and cultivate the 3 trainings and also the preliminary path. One should initiate so that the 3 trainings and the preliminary path will arise, and when they arise, one should develop them, cultivate them over and over again. In earlier part of the life, one is constantly tormented by the defilement. One is constantly tormented by the opposite mental state. Indulging in these defilements, one transgress in body and speech. And also, there will be, also the mind will not be good. There will also be transgression mentally also. Indulging in these kilesa defilements, one commits transgression by body speech, and mind. When one commits these transgressions by body, speech, and mind, it shows that one has not uprooted kilesa defilements. The kilesa defilements are gaining upper hand, and they are tormenting, overwhelming the person. In order to dispel these opposite mental states, one should practice Pubbabhaga, the preliminary path. One should initiate so that the preliminary path will arise. It is called Upadeti. One should initiate so that the preliminary path, Sila Samadhi Panya, will arise. And also cultivate to increase. One should develop, cultivate and increase the Viriya Sati Samadhi, Sila Samadhi Panya every single second by second. It is called Bhavana. Bhavana means to initiate, to develop, to cultivate and to increase these preliminary paths of Sila, Samadhi and Panya, morality, concentration and wisdom. One should cultivate and one should increase so that the Sila, Samadhi, Panya will be developed, cultivated, increased and proliferate. If one is developing this Sila, Samadhi, Panya for 1 moment in each second, in 1 minute there will be 60 moments of Sila, Samadhi and Panya. So if we calculate 1 moment of Sila, Samadhi, Panya per 2 seconds, then there will be 30 moments of Sila, Samadhi, Panya in 1 minute. In this way, the number of moments of Sila, Samadhi, Panya will become more and more increased. So that's why one should initiate the 3 trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, and one should also develop, cultivate and increase these 3 trainings, Sila, Samadhi and Panya. Saraji gives an example. If a newborn baby gets nursed by the mother, and if the baby receives nutrition, the baby will grow from small to big, and the baby will have big build. And finally, the baby will become matured. In the same way, by practicing diligently, one should initiate the 3 trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, and one should develop, cultivate and increase these 3 trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, so that one will become matured in Sila, Samadhi, Panya. When one becomes matured in Sila, Samadhi, Panya, then Ariya Magga, path knowledge, will be developed. And in order to get to this stage, one should practice diligently so that one will be developing, cultivating, increasing Viriya Sati Samadhi, effort, mindfulness and concentration. One should develop Sila, Samadhi, Panya, morality, concentration and wisdom, so that these 3 trainings will be developed, cultivated and increased, and it is called Bhavana. One should be developing, cultivating good mental states in oneself so that one's mind will be cultured and matured. So one also needs to feed the mind with spiritual nutrition. Just as one needs to feed the body with nutrition, in the same way, one also needs to feed the mind with necessary spiritual nutrition. In the text, there is a kind of materiality called oja, which means nutriment. In the food, there contains nutriment called oja, and it is also called ahara, nutriment. So in the body, there is internal nutriment that is produced by kamma, which is supported by citta, udu, and ahara. So in the body, there is the kamma produced nutriment, which is supported by consciousness, the temperature, and also nutrients. And also in the food, there is also nutrients. So combining the internal nutrient in the body with the outside nutrients obtained from food, one can have fresh new materiality. In the food, there are flavors, 6 kinds of flavor: sweet, sour, spicy, pungent, salty, and bitter. And in these flavors, there are the nutrients. So by taking these nutrients, one can have fresh new materiality. And these nutrients are called vitamins, such as vitamin A, vitamin B, and so on. One needs to take nutrition. One needs to take nutritious food and also water. In food and also in water, there are nutrients that are conducive to one's good health. So in order to be healthy, one should take nutritious food and water and inhale fresh air. When the body gets nutrition, one will be healthy. So one needs to take nutritious food as well as suitable vitamins, minerals, so as to keep oneself healthy. By getting healthy food and nutrition, one will have Paṇḍitā Rupa, one will have good materiality. So the person will be healthy. The person's complexion will be very clear and beautiful. One will not be scrawny, but one will have good build when one gets nutritious food. Without nutritious food, the materiality will be dry and withered. By getting nutritious food, one will be healthy, there will be good complexion, and so on. So there will be Paṇḍitā Rupa, good, pleasant materiality, when one gets suitable, healthy food and nutrition, and the person will be healthy. If one breathes in polluted air, one will not feel fresh. It will be very unhealthy. So that's why it is also important to breathe in fresh air. Just as the body needs nutrition, healthy food, and vitamins, in the same way, the mind also needs spiritual vitamins. Practicing Satipatthana meditation is feeding the mind with spiritual nutrition, spiritual vitamins. Practicing Satipatthana is also feeding the mind with Dhammoja, Dhamma nutrition. So by feeding the mind with spiritual nutrition, Dhamma nutrition, one's mind will become amazingly pure, clean, and matured. One should have Dhammoja, Dhamma nutrition, all the time. In order to get Dhamma nutrition, one should be mindful all the time. One should be mindful continuously by noting every arising object. Satipatthana practice is just like the essential elements. Just as the body needs the essential vitamins, nutrition, and fresh air, in the same way, the mind needs the essential spiritual vitamins. In order to get these spiritual vitamins, one needs to practice Satipatthana meditation. If a person inhales polluted air, then the person can get headache. And by inhaling fresh air, the person feels fresh and alert. In the same way, that's why one needs to inhale fresh air all the time. In the same way, one needs to practice Satipatthana meditation just as one has to breathe fresh air. Having Sati mindfulness, this mindfulness protects the mind away from the pollutants and defilements. Having mindfulness present, the mind will be pure, clean, and fresh. That's why Satipatthana meditation is essential for every human being, just as fresh air is essential for every being. And Saraji will continue to explain tomorrow. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.